It's too little, it's taken too long, and there's a performative aspect to it. But some of Israel's key Western allies are now leaning on the Netanyahu government to stop committing war crimes, while Israeli officials keep saying the genocidal part out loud. Britain's BBC is at it again. This time, it commissioned a documentary on Gaza, then stuck it on the shelf for reasons that are unconvincing. Plus, the Pakistani military surges in popularity domestically after its back-and-forth battles with India. Hospitals under attack again. Rubble being bombed, not for the first time. Skeletal men, women, and children starving to death. Entire families wiped out. The images coming out of Gaza are apocalyptic. We are watching the latest, perhaps final chapter in an Israeli act of genocide, one that no longer hides behind euphemisms and disinformation. From the Netanyahu government through to much of the country's mainstream news media, there is less and less mincing of words. They are now talking openly about conquering and occupying what remains of the Gaza Strip. There are some token gestures on offer, like the trickle of food aid that Israel is allowing into Gaza. It is an exercise in optics designed for international consumption rather than humanitarian relief. It is a charade concocted to buy Israel another thing that Palestinians in Gaza do not have: time. Speaking of which, how did it take 19 months of Israeli war crimes for politicians and news outlets overseas to finally pipe up about what we've all been watching on our phones? Why did they wait until it was too late? 19 months into its war of vengeance against Palestinians in Gaza, Israel is now answering the question so many people scrolling through their news feeds have been asking themselves. What could be worse than this? The answer? A military operation called Gideon's Chariots that aims to force Palestinian refugees into tiny corners of Gaza, paving the way for an all-out Israeli invasion aimed at taking full control of the Strip. An offensive that dispenses with any pretense of not targeting civilians, so many of whom are already emaciated, dying.
Starving people to death, preventing them food and water, depriving them of their human rights. This is nothing short of an ethnic cleansing. Unfortunately, Gaza has turned into a concentration camp, and it's not an exaggeration because we've seen it, we're living it through it.
It's almost hard to imagine that there could be a level of decimation that is somehow greater than what we have seen for the past year and a half already. However, this is primed to lead to even greater death and destruction than what we have seen previously.
But above all, it is without any clear purpose. It is just killing for the sake of killing and for the sake of maintaining a government in Israel. And they don't hide it. So the name of the operation should include its goal, and the goal is genocide.
To get an idea of what the Netanyahu government is planning and where this story is going, just listen to what Bezalel Smotrich is saying.
חרבה לחלוטין, אגב, פשוט מכיוון שהיא כולה תשתית טרור אחת בעולם מעל ומתחת לפני הקרקע. פשוט חרבה לחלוטין, אמרתי, אזרחיה.
Smotrich is Israel's finance minister. He is a far-right ultra-nationalist, a key member of the coalition government whose support the prime minister depends on to stay in power. And when the Israelis announced that for the first time in almost 3 months, they would stop blocking all food and humanitarian aid from entering Gaza and allow a limited number of truckloads in to feed the starving, Smotrich provided the reality check.
נדרש שיגיע לאוכלוסייה, פשוט כדי שהעולם לא יעצור אותנו ויאשים אותנו בפשעי מלחמה.
Politicians like Smotrich believe that historical Palestine belongs to the Jewish people and the Jewish people only, that they can increase their popularity if they are seen as being tough and frankly quite cruel against Palestinians.
The mindset that underpins the statement from Smotrich is honesty. He is being perfectly honest about what Israel is doing. More honest, in fact, than much of the Western media coverage, than many of the Western leaders who have been mealy-mouthed in their responses to what Israel is doing.
So Israel will supply some kind of humanitarian aid. They do it only for one reason, not because of the starvation, believe me. It's only about the images of the starvation which are spread in the world and create very justified anger over Israel. And above all, it's American pressure. I mean, the first day was with 5 trucks, 2.3 million people starving, 5 trucks. But it's not only about supplying food, it's first of all about stopping the war and stopping the mass killing.
Not that Israelis are getting much of that from their mainstream news channels or papers. The vast majority of their politicians not only back the war on Gaza, they endorse the horrific methods being used. One opposition leader, however, has defected from the ranks of that consensus and called out the state for its morality, its sanity.
מדינה שפויה לא מנהלת לחימה נגד אזרחים, לא הורגת תינוקות כתחביב ולא שמה לעצמה מטרות של גירוש אוכלוסייה.
A few other politicians at the Knesset have acknowledged reality all along.
ישראל עושה ג'נוסייד בעזה?
לפי כל ההגדרות כן, יש.
But such voices rarely get platformed on the outlets that most Israelis watch, television news channels, which routinely take the ugliest of political rhetoric and amplify it.
כל ילד, כל תינוק בעזה, אויב. האויב הוא לא החמאס.
That line of propaganda that somehow everyone in Gaza is part of Hamas is indefensible, both factually and morally. And it disregards multiple polls that have consistently shown that only 30% of Palestinians in Gaza support the organization, polls that were conducted before the attacks on October 7th.
When it comes to how Palestinians feel internally, we talk with people on a daily basis, and people are frustrated, people are angry at Hamas, and often point a finger that it has led them into a catastrophe. But always get back to the basic point. Had there not been an occupation for the past years, the military occupation, the suffocation, the blockade, the control of virtually every aspect of their life, we would have seen a different reality. People had hope in 2006 when the elections was held, and it produced a new leadership. Little they knew that they were going to be punished for the choice that they made. Despite their anger and frustration at Hamas and what it did on October 7th, this is not just a single event that should be taken out of context. It's a pinnacle of many of the events throughout the past history.
The Israeli media continues to be very jingoistic, focusing on Hamas fighters, focusing on military victories and conquests, showing a lot of coverage of the hostage families. They'll show the destruction of a hospital, and they'll say, but Hamas is using a hospital as a command center.
תושבים מתפנים גם מבתי החולים שכפי הנראה עשויים לשמש או כבר משמשים את חמאס כמגן אנושי.
If people are suffering, it's because Hamas is stealing food, as opposed to taking responsibility for what the military is doing.
לתת הומניטרי ולהכניס אוכל לארגון חמאס, וזו טעות ענקית ועצומה אגב.
Within the Israeli media, there is a very strong nationalistic push that we are right and the world is against us and we have to stand together. And that shapes the information that people allow to filter in as credible.
It's a very, very shameful time for Israeli media. They chose not to be journalists and to join the Israeli propaganda voluntarily. Nobody asked them to do it because they know what the audiences and the readership want. They want not to know and not to see Gaza. And the Israeli media is supplying them by hiding what's going on in Gaza.
Even some of Israel's most devoted allies, Western governments, news organizations, and pundits are saying enough is enough. The UK, France, and Canada, which have all sent weapons Israel's way, are now threatening it with sanctions over its egregious actions, calling the suffering in Gaza intolerable. Conservative Western publications, influential ones like The Economist and the Financial Times, are criticizing Israel using terminology they shied away from before. And there is a similar pattern occurring online.
I have resisted going as far as you have done in your criticism of the Israeli government. I resist no more.
Backers of the Israeli state are finally calling the war on Gaza what it demonstrably is: genocidal.
So I think you and I have reached a place in the last few weeks where we are in agreement.
But there's a performative aspect to those repositionings that merely pays lip service to a starving population. And until the Trump administration shifts its position, they won't amount to much. The larger question, one that should haunt every politician and news outlet that served as accomplices in a genocide, is what took them so long to develop a conscience.
Why waiting for 19 months? Why waiting for the destruction of the whole population to start acting now? Why did not prevent the ammunition shipment to the Israeli military to change the course of the genocidal acts on the ground? But it's just too late now. I'm afraid we're talking about a whole destroyed population.
People in Gaza have now survived over a year and a half of nights where they thought that every single night would be their last. They have seen unimaginable scenes of death and destruction, not just through the computer screens like so much of us around the world have watched, but before their very eyes. They have smelt the stench of death in an unending way. They want an end to this hell. They want the world to remember that they exist, that they are human, and that they deserve better than this.
When a documentary about Palestinian medics is commissioned by the BBC, made for the BBC, but never makes it to air, you have to ask, what's stopping the UK's publicly funded network from broadcasting it? Ryan Coles has been following the story.
The documentarians who produced Gaza, Medics Under Fire for the BBC, have gone public about a dispute with the network. Since late April, filmmakers at a company called Basement Films have been tweeting about the network putting their documentary on ice. The film was commissioned by the BBC's flagship current affairs program, Panorama. According to its producers, it passed all legal and fact checks, had cleared editorial reviews, and was supposed to be put out in February. A letter to the BBC's Director General, signed by 600 media figures, has called for the film to be released. The network says the delay is because of an ongoing review into a previous documentary, Gaza, How to Survive a War Zone.
Good morning. You all right?
Narrated by a young Palestinian living through the genocide, that film had to be taken down in February when it was found that the boy's father was an official in Gaza's civilian administration run by Hamas. The fact that the BBC has been sitting on a documentary for 3 months now, a film that it has signed off on because of a previous film that isn't even available to view anymore, reinforces a point made in the open letter, that the BBC seems paralyzed on how to deal with the Gaza story, and that its actions amount to political suppression. Since the start of the genocide, the BBC has been criticized for biased coverage, often echoing official Israeli narratives, which are routinely disproven, while systematically dehumanizing Palestinians.
I'm sorry for your own personal loss. I mean, can I just be clear, though? You cannot condone the killing of civilians in Israel. Yes, and
so this is nothing new. That's why this question.
At least 3 members of staff have resigned from the network. One of them, a former presenter with the BBC, has gone public.
So I essentially quit the BBC over its unwillingness to follow the evidence coming out of Gaza. There is an accountability hole at the heart of the BBC's Gaza coverage. Crucial context of every kind, historical, political, legal, has been conspicuously omitted from coverage to the extent that our audiences, if they are simply relying on the BBC for good coverage of Gaza, are disinformed.
Like so many news organizations based in the West, the BBC's reputation has been badly damaged by its coverage of Gaza, and it's not something its viewers are likely to forget anytime soon.
Thanks, Ryan. A deadly attack in Indian-administered Kashmir last month brought 2 nuclear neighbors, India and Pakistan, to the brink of war. fighter jets were scrambled, warnings were issued, and a combined population of 1.7 billion people held its collective breath. While the tension has since cooled, the politics around this story still simmer. Last week, we discussed the chaos caused by some of the mainstream news coverage on the Indian side. This week, we look at Pakistan, where the military is riding a wave of patriotic fervor. The armed forces permeate every facet of Pakistani life, starting with their control over politics. Prior to this confrontation, the men in uniform who hold power behind the scenes were as unpopular as they've ever been. That has changed. Waging a war of memes, music, and messaging, the armed forces have rebranded and reminded the country who's really in charge. The Listening Post's Tariq Nafa now on the Pakistani military's political comeback.
This is Pakistan's latest crush. In the past few weeks, Air Vice Marshal Aurangzeb Ahmed has become the most Googled and most memed person in the country.
I'll pick up from where I left. PAF versus IF. 6-0.
Ahmed made a name for himself, delivering military briefings during Pakistan's confrontation with India this month.
You need a hero. I think partly that's the appeal, right? And when you lose wars or you want public support, you need dead heroes, because that kind of makes people, come to your side and sympathy and support. But when it's a righteous war where you've been attacked and you're defending yourself, you need living heroes, right? So he kind of sticks all that criteria. Social media is also very much about visuals, who's good looking, who has swag, and who you can make memes about. So we see similar stuff happening around Aurangzeb Ahmed.
Pakistan's military is riding high on a wave of popularity after coming close to all-out war with India. The trigger for the violence was the killing of 26 civilians in Indian-administered Kashmir at the end of April. India accused the Pakistani state, specifically the military, of sponsoring the attack.
Pakistani and Pakistan-trained terrorists belonging to the Lashkar-e-Taiba carried out a savage attack.
For decades, Pakistan has been accused of training and funding militias operating on the Indian side of Kashmir. As recently as April, the country's defense minister was challenged on this point and didn't deny it.
You do admit, sir, that Pakistan has had a long history of backing and supporting and training and funding these terrorist organizations.
Well, we have been doing this dirty work for the United States for about 3 decades,
This time, Pakistani officials demanded proof from New Delhi for its accusations. They asked that an international inquiry be set up. India dismissed them and launched what it called a retaliatory military operation instead.
So as they say, never let a good crisis go to waste. And the Pakistani military really took that on. Within 2 weeks of a bullying, assertive India, giving them a war, which they pushed back against and gave India a bloody nose for, has made them now all of a sudden the darlings of Pakistan. That is a signal to the military that if you do that one job that you're constitutionally bound to do, then the people of Pakistan will be behind you. Not only did they do their job when it came down to it, but also they brilliantly used the best methods possible for social, digital, and mainstream media.
Messaging is always important, right? What boosts the morale of your forces, morale of the citizens, etc. And we've seen plenty of that in Pakistan during these last few days. It's not the first time that we've seen, music videos. Obviously, you want like an anthem, something to get behind.
The Pakistani military has a media wing primed to capitalize on moments like this. Aside from making music videos, the Inter-Services Public Relations Department, or ISPR, has also made a documentary on the attack in Kashmir. The head of the ISPR, the military's main spokesman, has been sitting down for interviews with international news outlets.
Our message is clear. We are for peace, but let's see any violations occurred, any aggression is made against Pakistan.
And then our response will be very assured, would be swift, and be brutal.
As tensions escalated between the neighboring countries, Pakistan lifted a block on X that had been in place for more than a year, giving a boost to citizens who produced a wave of memes championing the armed forces. Pakistani cities have been covered in posters supporting the military, and the outpouring of positivity has changed the Pakistani establishment's standing in the country.
So if you look back at the last few years of the military's record vis-a-vis the people of Pakistan, this is how a failing state would perform, theoretically. 2 insurgencies in 2 of the western provinces, a very popular man ousted, 10,000 people arrested, many of them being tried in military courts, the country's best and brightest journalists killed, abducted, kidnapped. They're involved in politics, they're involved in banking, they're involved in the economy, and they're involved in the judiciary.
In countries where militaries have had a de facto role in politics and in economic enterprise, as in the case of Pakistani military, the relationship between the military and citizenry becomes much more complicated. However, 2 years ago, around the time of Imran Khan's ouster, there was an unprecedented fall from grace when it comes to the military.
I think in this particular moment, the Pakistani military felt it was not popular. It had jailed the most popular man in Pakistan, Imran Khan, who was prime minister, for taking on the Pakistani military.
Part of the reason why the Imran Khan ouster became such a significant flashpoint in terms of sentiment towards the military is because Imran Khan came into politics through popular military support as well. So when that fell apart, because it came through military engineering, there was much more challenge. So it felt like a moment of reckoning in Pakistan where people were beginning to openly challenge and question the role of the military.
The Pakistani military's popularity was at a record low. During riots back in 2023, Pakistanis stormed multiple army and intelligence facilities across the country. The uprising was crushed, but public anger remained. The face-off with India has delivered an unexpected sea change in sentiment. This past week, Army Chief General Asim Munir was rewarded for spearheading Pakistan's fight back. He was given the ceremonial title of Field Marshal. However, amidst this moment of national jubilation, many Pakistanis cannot shake a sense of fear and concern.
Already there is this discussion around what this means for Pakistan going forward. The Pakistan military already takes up a lot of civilian space in terms of control over civilian institutions, interference in foreign policy, in the country's economy. Pakistan is an incredibly poor country. We have severe economic woes. Also, the defense budgets historically increases every year. But there is some pushback on that, right? And the Pakistan military has to justify it. It nearly always wins, but it has to justify it. I can't imagine there'll be much pushback right now. And that's kind of, I think, a sad thing to happen to a country which is really struggling.
You don't want Pakistan to become an even more militarized, unaccountable state. And those are some of the conversations that are happening right now, that in glorifying in a complete blanket manner, you can't turn away from some of the realities and the baggage that comes with the military here.
And finally, while the Pakistani military reaps the probably temporary rewards of its messaging campaign over what happened in Kashmir and thereafter, New Delhi has announced its own belated strategy to get its narrative out. The Modi government has tasked nearly 60 members of parliament with fanning out across the globe to pitch India's side of this story to governments, news outlets, and the Indian diaspora, the world's largest. India's geopolitical case was not helped, however, by some hyper-nationalistic output from its TV news channels, content that ranged from the comical to the dangerous and attracted a lot of damaging publicity overseas. So while the military conflict has eased off, the battle for hearts and minds is still being waged between India and Pakistan. We'll be tracking that story, and we'll see you next time here at The Listening Post.
So they're saying if you say free Palestine, that is that's like saying that's inciting people.
Christ is king.
That's inciting people to do. But here's a congressman who takes a lot of money from AIPAC. He's saying we should nuke Gaza.
Oh, well, that's smart. It's very close to precious Israel.
Yeah, so
that's smart. Smart thinking.
So here's watch what he says.
The fact of the matter is, the Palestinian cause is an evil one.
Yeah. So the Palestinian cause is the one, where
live in a concentration camp. That one.
Yeah, the one where they don't want to live in a concentration camp anymore. That
the 67 borders that Israel could have done but doesn't want to do. They'd rather kill every last one of them instead of that.
Yeah, like they'd want to have their own state, that kind of thing. Be autonomous, self-governing, that kind of thing.
Is it as evil as putting an Al Qaeda in charge of Syria? Is it like that level?
Is it as that level of evil, putting Al Qaeda in charge of Syria?
A ceasefire deal on the table right now that the White House is hoping both Israel and Hamas will sign on to. Does this shooting change anything when it comes to the course of the war or the negotiations to end it?
Well, I think it speaks to the importance of the only end of the conflict is complete and total surrender by those who support Muslim terror. In World War II, we did not negotiate a surrender with the Nazis. We did not negotiate a surrender with the Japanese. We nuked the Japanese twice in order to get unconditional surrender. That needs to be the same here. There is something deeply, deeply wrong with this culture, and it needs to be defeated.
We heard in Brooks.
What's that? What's that, Kurt? Say it again.
Islam itself has to be defeated.
Yeah, that's what he said.
Not
Their
just
culture.
Hamas.
They're not Hamas. It's their whole culture.
Well, thank God we come from a superior Western culture where there's not problems like those people have.
So, that, and of course, that guy takes a ton. Recipient of AIPAC's fastest ever endorsement wants to nuke Gaza.
No, he just said we did that before, and it should be on the table, is how I took it.
Come see us live in Los Angeles, Buffalo, Toledo, Montreal, Ottawa, Glasgow, Manchester, Belfast, Dublin, London, Liverpool, Birmingham. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets.
Thank you, and it's a tremendous honor for me to be here with Gabor, one of the intellectual and moral giants of our time. This time next week, I will be in Cairo with the great cartoonist Joe Sacco, who wrote Palestine and Footnotes in Gaza. And we will be beginning our book on the genocide by interviewing Palestinians in Cairo, a book my publisher, who's made handsome profits off me in the past, Simon & Schuster, has already told me they don't want. My old office in Gaza is a pile of rubble. The streets around it, where I went for coffee, ordered maftool or manakish, had a haircut, are flattened. Friends and colleagues are dead, or more often have vanished. Last heard from weeks or months ago, no doubt buried somewhere under the broken slabs of concrete. The uncounted dead in the tens, perhaps hundreds of thousands. Israel has made Gaza a wasteland. 50 million tons of rubble and debris. Rats and dogs scavenge amid the ruins and the fetid pools of raw sewage, the putrid stench and contamination of decaying corpses rises from beneath the mountains of shattered concrete. Palestinians, 90% of whom are displaced, risk death from unexploded ordnance left behind after 18 months of airstrikes, artillery barrages, missile strikes, and blasts from tank shells, and a variety of toxic substances, including raw sewage, and asbestos. Israel, supplied with billions of dollars of weapons from the United States, Germany, Italy, and the UK, created this hell, and it intends to maintain it. The blockade of all food and humanitarian aid since March 2nd, that's more than 60 days, has resulted in outbreaks of hepatitis A caused by drinking contaminated water, ailments such as scabies, malnutrition. 60,000 children show signs of malnutrition. 57 Palestinians have starved so far since March 2nd, most of them elderly and children. Starvation, widespread nausea, and vomiting. Palestinians in Gaza live in makeshift tents, encamped amid these slabs of concrete. Many have been forced to move over a dozen times. 9 in 10 homes have been destroyed or damaged. Apartment blocks, schools, hospitals, bakeries, mosques, universities. Israel blew up Isra University in Gaza City and the Turkish Palestinian Hospital on March 21st in controlled demolitions. Cemeteries, shops, offices, all have been obliterated. The United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees in the Near East, UNRWA, estimates that clearing Gaza of the rubble will take 15 years and cost between $40 billion and $50 billion. But any rebuilding of Gaza, Israel and the Trump administration have decided will not be done for the Palestinians. And Israeli organizations, including the far-right Nakala organization, have held conferences to prepare for Jewish colonization of Gaza once Palestinians are removed. This is the last chapter of the genocide, accentuated by the decision by Israel's security cabinet to occupy all of Gaza and remain there indefinitely, while emptying the northern part of the Gaza Strip completely of Palestinians. It is the final blood-soaked push to drive the Palestinians from Gaza. No food, no medicine, no shelter, no clean water, no electricity. Israel has turned Gaza into a Dante-esque cauldron of human misery, where Palestinians are being killed in their hundreds and soon again in their thousands and tens of thousands, or they will be forced out, never to return. This final chapter marks the end of Israeli lies, the lie of the two-state solution, the lie that Israel respects the laws of war that protect civilians, the lie that Israel bombs hospitals and schools only because they are used as staging areas by Hamas, the lie that Hamas uses civilians as human shields, while Israel routinely forces captive Palestinians to enter potentially booby-trapped tunnels and buildings ahead of Israeli troops. The lie that Hamas or Palestine Islamic Jihad are responsible, the charge often being errant Palestinian rockets, for the destruction of hospitals, United Nations buildings, or mass Palestinian casualties. The lie that humanitarian aid to Gaza is blocked because Hamas is hijacking the trucks or smuggling weapons and war material. The lie that Israeli babies are beheaded or Palestinians carried out mass rape of Israeli women. The lie that 75% of the tens of thousands killed in Gaza were Hamas, quote-unquote, terrorists. The lie that Hamas, because it was allegedly rearming and recruiting new fighters, is responsible for the breakdown of the ceasefire on March 18th, a breakdown that has seen more than 2,300 Palestinians killed, 6,000 injured, adding to the official death toll of 52,000, with, of course, thousands, perhaps tens of thousands more under the rubble. Israel's naked genocidal project is exposed. The few remaining food kitchens will close within days, now that the UN's World Food Program and UNRWA's food stocks have run out. Mass starvation will follow, along with deaths by disease caused by contaminated water and food, and scores of killed and wounded each day under the relentless assault of bombs, missiles, shells, and bullets. Nothing, if Israel has its way, will function. Bakeries, water treatment, sewage plants, hospitals, distribution centers, clinics. Less than half of the 53 emergency vehicles operated by the Palestine Red Crescent Society are functional because of fuel shortages, and soon there will be none. Israel's message is unequivocal. Gaza will be uninhabitable. Leave or die. And the images from Gaza during the past 18 months were awful, but what is coming now will be worse. It will rival the most atrocious war crimes of the 20th century, including the mass starvation, wholesale slaughter, and leveling of the Warsaw Ghetto in 1943 by the Nazis. October 7th marked the dividing line between an Israeli policy that advocated the brutalization and subjugation of the Palestinians and a policy that calls for their extermination and removal from historic Palestine. What we are witnessing is the equivalent of the moment triggered by the annihilation of some 200 soldiers led by George Armstrong Custer in June 1876 at the Battle of the Little Bighorn. After that humiliating defeat, Native Americans were targeted for extermination, with the remnants forced into prisoner of war camps, later renamed reservations, where thousands died of disease, lived under the merciless gaze of their armed occupiers, and fell into a life of immiseration and despair. Expect the same for the Palestinians in Gaza, dumped, I fear, in one of the world's hellholes and forgotten. The expansion of Greater Israel, which includes the seizing of Syrian territory in the Golan Heights, southern Lebanon, Gaza, of course, and the occupied West Bank, where some 40,000 Palestinians have been driven from their homes and which I expect will soon be annexed by Israel, is being cemented into place. But the genocide in Gaza is only the start. The world is breaking down under the onslaught of the climate crisis, which is triggering mass migrations, failed states, catastrophic wildfires, hurricanes, storms, flooding, and droughts. As global stability unravels, industrial violence, which is decimating the Palestinians, will become ubiquitous. Israel's annihilation of Gaza marks the death of a global order guided by internationally agreed upon laws and rules, ones often violated by the United States in its imperial wars in Vietnam, Iraq, and Afghanistan, but the one that was at least acknowledged as a utopian vision. The United States and its Western allies not only supply the weaponry to sustain the genocide, but obstruct the demand by most nations for adherence to humanitarian law. They have carried out attacks against the only nation, Yemen, which has tried to halt the genocide. The militarized drones, helicopter gunships, walls and barriers, checkpoints, coils of concertina wire, watchtowers, detention centers, deportations, brutality, and torture, denial of entry visas, apartheid existence that comes with being undocumented, loss of individual rights, and electronic surveillance are as familiar to the desperate migrants along the Mexican border or attempting to enter Europe as they are to the Palestinians. And the message the global North has given to the rest of the world is this: we have everything, and if you try and take it away from us, we will kill you. Thank you.
Esperen, tenemos Tenemos enemigos en la zona.
Democracy depends on a free press. Please support our independent journalism at democracynow.org/give.
Two staffers at the Israeli embassy in Washington, D.C. were shot dead last night outside the Capitol Jewish Museum. This is D.C. Police Chief Pamela Smith.
We believe the shooting was committed by a single suspect who is now in custody. Prior to the shooting, the suspect was observed pacing back and forth outside of the museum. He approached a group of 4 people, produced a handgun, and opened fire, striking both of our decedents. After the shooting, the suspect then entered the museum and was detained by event security. Once in handcuffs, the suspect identified where he discarded the weapon, and that weapon has been recovered, and he implied that he committed the offense.
Israel's foreign ministry identified the shooting victims as 30-year-old Yaron Lashinsky and Sarah Lynn Milgram. They both worked at the Israeli embassy and were about to be engaged. They'd been attending a private event at the Capitol Jewish Museum. According to one of the organizers, the event focused on advancing humanitarian aid efforts for Gaza. Authorities arrested 30-year-old Elias Rodriguez of Chicago, who was filmed shouting in support of Palestinians as he was being detained.
The journalist Ken Klippenstein posted what is believed to be a manifesto by the alleged gunman, Elias Rodriguez. In the document, he praises Aaron Bushnell, the U.S. Air Force person who self-immolated last year in an act of protest outside the Israeli embassy in Washington, D.C. Rodriguez wrote, quote, Aaron Bushnell and others sacrificed themselves in the hopes of stopping the massacre, and the state works to make us feel their sacrifice was made in vain, that there is no hope in escalating for Gaza and no point in bringing the war home. We can't let them succeed. Their sacrifices were not made in vain.
We go now to Tel Aviv, where we're joined by the Israeli journalist Gideon Levy, an award-winning Israeli journalist, author, columnist for the newspaper Haaretz, member of its editorial board. Gideon Levy's latest book is titled The Killing of Gaza, Reports on a Catastrophe. Thank you so much for being with us, Gideon. If you could first respond to the killing of these 2 staffers, a couple who walked outside of this American Jewish Committee event at the Jewish Museum in Washington last night.
I mean, this incident can be only condemned. Nothing that Israel is doing can justify such a murder. It was a murder. And unfortunately also, this kind of violence will not bring the Gaza war to its end. So it's tasteless, it's criminal, it's tragic. 2 young people being murdered. It doesn't serve anything, and it should be condemned and not justified by anything. Nothing can justify it.
And Gideon, if you could just talk about what the preliminary response in Israel has been and whether you anticipate anything happening as a direct consequence of this murder.
No, I don't expect anything in particular connected with this murder, but the general atmosphere in Israel starts to be realizing that because of the war in Gaza, Israel is turning into a pariah state. People start to digest it, start to understand that there will be a price for all the crimes, for the mass killing, for the destruction. And the longer this war will go on, the more damage will be made also to Israel. First, the main damage is obviously to the real direct victims in Gaza. But also Israel is going to pay a price for running this war for so long with so little justification, legitimacy, or purpose.
Well, Gideon, if you could talk about your latest column, Israel's military leaders are not only obeying orders, they could have stopped the Gaza massacre. If you could elaborate on what you say in the piece.
Sure. There is a tendency, mainly among my friends in the Zionist left or in the central left of Israel, to put everything on the shoulders of the government, which is right to do. but to give some immunity to the army, as if the army is still the old holy cow of Israel. I cannot accept it, because finally the children, almost 1,000 babies, can you imagine yourself, almost 1,000 babies in 19 months, not to speak about the 17,000 children. They were killed by soldiers. They were killed by pilots. They were killed by people who have to take accountability for this. Yes, the government decides about the policy, and the government should be blamed for such a policy. But by the end of the day, we cannot say it's only the government, because the army did it. There are almost no refuseniks in this war, which is quite surprising. There are some, but very few, and for sure not public ones. And all the others are committing a criminal policy, a policy with a black flag on it, a policy which is very clear does not meet any of the articles of the international law. And therefore to say we don't attack the army, we don't criticize the army, it's only the government, is really doing our life too easy. Yes, the army is very popular in Israel. We have to break this militarism once and for all and say, yes,